On a cold, rainy night, Elena Ramirez stood at the edge of the restaurant's awning and watched the city drown. The rain came down in silver sheets, cold and merciless, pooling in the gutters and flooding the crosswalk where a taxi had stalled 3 minutes ago. She had $11 in her wallet, a blister on her left heel from 13 hours of double shifts, and a problem she didn't know how to solve. She pulled her phone from her apron pocket and read her daughter's message for the 4th time. Sofia had sent it at 2:47 in the afternoon, sandwiched between Mateo's nap and the dinner rush. "Mom, I can't go alone. Please. The wedding is Saturday. Everyone will know. I can't." Elena closed her eyes. She understood every word Sofia wasn't writing. Her daughter, 25 years old and already carrying the ruins of a marriage no one saw coming, 3 years of promises that turned into bruises, then a custody agreement, then a tiny apartment that smelled like fresh paint and old grief. Sofia had rebuilt herself from the foundation up, slowly, stubbornly, the way Elena had taught her. But Daniel's cousin's wedding was a gathering of the whole social circle that had watched Sofia's marriage fall apart, and showing up alone meant answering every pitying question and wearing every sideways glance like a second skin. Elena needed to find her daughter a date by Saturday. It was Wednesday night. She laughed once, short and sharp, because what else could you do? She had no one to call. Sofia's friends were all mutual friends infected by divorce drama. Her own coworker Yolanda had a nephew, but he was 22 and spent most of his time posting gym selfies. She thought briefly about asking Mr. Park, the restaurant owner, but dismissed it just as quickly. He was 68 and called Sofia, the pretty one, in a way that made Elena's spine straighten with warning. The rain was not letting up. Elena pushed a silver-streaked strand of dark hair from her cheek and studied the crosswalk below the awning. Her feet ached in the particular deep way that 13 hours on tile produces, a tiredness that lived below the muscle and had nothing to do with rest. She was 48 years old, and she had been tired since her late 20s, and she had learned to carry the tiredness the way you carry a coat, just another layer, barely noticed, necessary. She was about to turn back inside when a black car pulled to the curb. Not parking, just stopping the way expensive cars do when they know the world will wait for them. The driver was out and around with an umbrella before the engine had fully quieted. The man who stepped out was not the kind of man you forgot. He was tall, taller than anyone Elena had seen in years, well over 6 feet, wearing a charcoal coat that must have cost more than 3 months of her rent. His hair was jet black, cut close at the sides and slightly longer on top, raked back from a face that was almost aggressively handsome, sharp jaw, heavy brows, a mouth set in a line that said he was not used to being surprised. He moved with the particular economy of a man who had never once been in a hurry, because everything waited for him anyway. On his left hand, visible even from this distance because it caught the restaurant sign's yellow light, a platinum ring coiled around his pinky finger. A tiger, small and precise and unmistakable. He was walking toward the restaurant entrance. He was going to pass directly in front of her. Elena had spent 23 years learning when to push and when to hold back. She had raised a daughter alone, worked 2 jobs when Sofia was in diapers, negotiated with landlords and banks and child services caseworkers who looked at her like she was a problem to be managed. She was not, by nature, a woman who asked strangers for favors. She spoke anyway. "Excuse me." Her voice was steady, which surprised even her. I know how strange this is going to sound." The man stopped. He turned to look at her with the kind of patience that is actually the absence of patience, still and watchful like something deciding whether to bother. His eyes were dark, almost black in the yellow light from the restaurant sign, and they moved over her face in 2 precise seconds that felt much longer. "My daughter," Elena said, and she heard herself say it plainly because plain was what she had. "She's 25. She's been through a hard year. There's a wedding Saturday. Her ex-husband's whole circle will be there and she's terrified to go alone. I need someone to escort her. Someone," she searched for the word, present. "Someone who looks like he belongs in a room full of people who have more money than sense." She did not know why she was still talking. His face had not changed. "I'll pay," she added. "I don't have a lot. But I'll figure it out." He looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then, with something that might have been amusement if it had been in a different face, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and produced a card. It was matte black, no name on the front, just a number embossed in silver. He held it out between 2 fingers. "Text that number," he said. His voice was low, accented, Korean underneath the flawless English. "Saturday. What time?" Elena took the card. It was heavier than a card had any right to be. She turned it over. The back was entirely blank. "I'm Elena," she said because it seemed wrong not to. Kai, he said. Then he walked past her and into the restaurant, as though he had simply paused to check the weather. Elena stood in the rain holding the card. Her heart was beating in a way that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with instinct. The animal part of her brain that had kept her alive through 23 years of being a woman alone in a hard city. The card felt warm, which was impossible because it was metal and the air was 41 degrees. She went inside. She finished her shift. She wiped down 14 tables, answered 3 questions about the spice level of the tteokbokki, and explained twice that yes, the bibimbap came with egg by default. She smiled until her face hurt. At 11:45 she untied her apron, collected her tips, $38 a good night, and sat down at the last booth in the corner with a cup of cold barley tea. She put the card on the table. She looked at it. Her daughter deserved to walk into that wedding hall with her shoulders back and her head high. Her daughter deserved one evening that wasn't shadowed by shame. Elena had raised Sofia to believe she was worth something, and the last 3 years had done their best to strip that belief down to bare wire, and the work of rebuilding it was not something Elena could do alone, not with double shifts and a 4-year-old grandson who needed new shoes every 8 weeks and an ex-son-in-law who still found ways to make Sofia feel small even from across town. She picked up the card. She typed the number into her phone. She wrote, Saturday evening. 7 o'clock. The Galleria. My daughter's name is Sofia. She has a 4-year-old son. Please be kind to her. She hit send. The response came in 40 seconds. It was a single word, understood. Elena set the phone down on the table and looked at the rain against the window. She thought about the way the man called Kai had looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her, with a kind of focus that felt like being measured. She thought about the weight of the card. She thought about the car, the coat, the way the driver had anticipated his movement before he had fully decided to move. She thought, I may have just made a very big mistake. But Sofia would walk into that wedding with her head high, and for now that was the only thing that mattered. She finished her tea. She went home. She checked on Matteo sleeping in his little bed, one arm thrown over a stuffed dinosaur, breathing the easy breath of someone who didn't know yet that the world required armor. She kissed his forehead. She went to her own bed. She did not sleep for a long time. The first delivery arrived Thursday morning, while Elena was still in her robe. A single knock, then a uniformed man from a boutique she had only ever seen from the sidewalk, cream-colored bags with black ribbon, the kind of store whose door handles were polished daily. He was carrying 3 boxes. For Sofia Ramirez, he said and looked at his tablet. And a smaller package for a Matteo Ramirez. Elena signed for them with her hand not quite steady. Sofia came out of the bathroom with wet hair and Matteo's cereal bowl balanced against her hip. She stared at the boxes on the kitchen table. Mom, what did you do? Open them, Elena said. The dress was midnight blue silk charmeuse, cut simply and perfectly, the kind of dress that didn't announce itself because it didn't need to. There were shoes wrapped in tissue paper, heeled, delicate, the exact right height for Sofia's build. A small velvet pouch held earrings, sapphire drops, nothing ostentatious. And in the smallest box, a child's button-down shirt in pale blue, tiny gray trousers, miniature suspenders, and a soft felt cap that made Elena close her eyes for a moment because it was exactly the kind of thing a 4-year-old would allow himself to be dressed in. Sofia sat down slowly in the kitchen chair. Mom, she said again. There's a man escorting you Saturday, Elena said. She had rehearsed this. His name is Kai. I met him briefly. She paused, very well presented. Sofia looked at her mother with an expression that was equal parts disbelief and cautious, terrified hope. You hired someone to be my date. I asked someone, Elena said. It's not the same thing. Sofia stared at the dress for a long moment. Then she reached out and touched the fabric, and Elena watched her daughter's face do something complicated and quiet, something that looked like the first exhale after a year of held breath. The sapphire earrings caught the morning light on the table between them. Sofia lifted one and held it between 2 fingers, watching the light turn inside the stone, and the look on her face was the look of a woman remembering that beautiful things were allowed to belong to her. He bought all this, Sofia said softly. He doesn't even know me. No, Elena said. He doesn't. Matteo ran over in his pajamas and grabbed the felt cap. He put it on sideways and looked up at them both with pure delight. Is this mine? Yes, baby, Sofia said, and her voice broke on the second word, just barely. Elena turned to the window so neither of them would see her face. The gifts continued across Thursday and Friday. Not lavishly, not in a way that alarmed. more as though someone had been paying quiet attention to what was missing and was simply correcting an oversight. A second delivery Thursday afternoon brought a spa appointment for Sofia that afternoon. No explanation, just an address and a time. A third package Friday morning held a small toolkit for Mateo, age-appropriate and carefully chosen, the kind of toy set designed for a child who liked to build things, which Sofia had mentioned to no one outside the family in years. Friday afternoon brought a messenger with a small folded note, on the same matte black paper as the card, no signature. The car will arrive at 6:30. Sofia and Mateo will be brought home safely after. There is a man named Jiangsu. He will be with you all evening. Do not worry about him. Elena read the note 3 times. She held it up to the light. There was no watermark, no logo, nothing. She folded it back and put it in the pocket of her apron and spent her entire Friday evening shift thinking about it. It was not a date's note. A date's note said, looking forward to Saturday. A date's note was hopeful, a little nervous, performing. This note said, the logistics have been arranged. Nothing will go wrong. She called her old friend Carmela that night, standing in the parking lot behind the restaurant, because she didn't want to call from inside. Carmela had been married 3 times and knew things about men that other women learned only from grief. Carmela, Elena said. If a man sends a note that says, there is a man named Jiangsu, he will be with you all evening, what does that mean? Pause. A bodyguard? Carmela said. I think so. Another pause longer. Elena. Who did you ask? I don't know, Elena said honestly. She could hear Carmela breathing. Be careful, Carmela said. That kind of money doesn't live quietly. Elena went home. She sat at the kitchen table after Sofia and Mateo were asleep. She opened her laptop and searched, Platinum Tiger Ring Korean Significance. The first 3 results were jewelry sites. The fourth was a forum post, archived from 6 years ago on a true crime enthusiast board. It was a long post, badly written, translated from Korean. She read it twice. Then she read it a third time more slowly. The post discussed a criminal organization known in Seoul's underworld as the Tiger Line, not because of their brutality though they had that too, but because of the distinctive platinum ring worn by its leadership tier. A coiling tiger, left pinky finger, always the left. The organization was known for acquisitions, businesses, properties, debts, and people. Their reach extended from Seoul to Tokyo to, in recent years, North American cities with Korean financial interests. The current head of the organization was described only as K, mid-30s, never photographed clearly, fluent in English, reportedly educated abroad. Elena sat very still. She looked at her phone. She looked at the single-word text, understood. She could call it off. She could text the number and say, I've changed my mind, I apologize for wasting your time. She could bundle the dress back in its tissue paper and find some other solution to Saturday. She was still thinking about this at 11:15 when her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. The message was a photograph. It took her a moment to understand what she was looking at. Then she did understand, and she set the phone face down on the table and pressed both her hands flat against the wood to stop them from shaking. The photograph was of Sofia. Taken from a distance, from across the street. Sofia was at the park with Mateo, at the little playground 2 blocks from their apartment. She was pushing him on the swing. Mateo was laughing with his head thrown back. The photograph was clear and high resolution and absolutely sickeningly deliberate. Below the photograph, 1 line of text, tell your daughter to cancel Saturday. Tell her to stay home. Elena picked the phone back up. Her hands were not shaking anymore. Something had moved through her. Fear, yes, but underneath the fear a hard and quiet fury that had been waiting for years to have something solid to press against. She texted Kai's number. Someone just sent me a photograph of my daughter and grandson at the park. A threat. They told her to cancel Saturday. The response took 12 seconds. I know. It has been handled. The person who sent that photo will not be sending anything else. Still come Saturday. Jiangsu will be there earlier than 6:30. Elena read the message. She thought about what handled meant and she chose not to think about it too specifically, the way you choose not to look too closely at the underside of something beautiful. She went to check on Sofia. Her daughter was asleep, Mateo curled against her side, both of them breathing in the slow rhythm of people who didn't know what was circling outside their window. The midnight blue dress hung on the back of the closet door. The sapphire earrings sat on the dresser. The small felt cap was on the nightstand where Mateo had placed it before bed, with the extreme deliberateness of a 4-year-old who understood ownership. Elena stood in the doorway. She thought, I have invited something into this family that I do not fully understand. She thought, but whatever it is It moved faster to protect my daughter than anything I have ever managed alone. She went to bed. For the first time in 3 days she slept. The car arrived at 6:25. Black, long, impossibly clean, it parked outside the apartment building with a quiet authority that made the neighbor's dog stop barking, as though even animals understood not to make noise near certain things. Jiangsu was a wide-shouldered man in his 40s with a face like a closed door and a communication style that consisted of single functional sentences. He held the car door open. He did not stare at Sofia. Sofia came down the stairs in the midnight blue dress and her chin just slightly higher than usual, the sapphire earrings catching the lobby light. Matteo was dressed to perfection in his small blue shirt and suspenders, the felt cap on straight for once, and he held his mother's hand with the focused energy of a child who had been told that tonight he was important. Elena watched them from the top of the stairs, one hand on the railing, and felt something in her chest that was too large for a single name. "You look beautiful," Elena said. Sofia looked up at her. "Don't make me cry." "I'm not," Elena said. "I'm just telling you." They held each other's eyes for 3 seconds. Then Sofia squared her shoulders and walked out to the car. Kai was already at the Galleria when they arrived. The venue occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower downtown, all clean lines and warm gold light, the city spread below it like a promise. He was waiting at the top of the escalator. Sofia had seen the photograph Elena had shown her on her phone, slightly blurry, taken through a restaurant window, just enough to prepare. But the photograph had not prepared her. He was wearing a black suit that had been made for no one else but him, fitted across shoulders that needed no engineering to be impressive. His hair was back. His jaw was clean-shaved. And he looked at Sofia the way someone looks at a painting they have been standing too far from, with the sudden, arrested recognition of distance finally corrected. "Sofia," he said. "Not a question." "Kai," she said. He looked down at Matteo with an expression that was not quite a smile but was something adjacent, something softened. He crouched to Matteo's level, which was remarkable in a suit like that, and held out his hand, not the fingers-bent handshake adults do with children but a proper, flat-palmed handshake like Matteo was an equal. Matteo looked at the hand. He looked up at Kai's face. He put his small hand in Kai's and shook it with great seriousness. "I like your hat," Kai said. Matteo touched the brim of the felt cap. "It's mine," he said. "I know," Kai said. "It suits you." And whatever Sofia had steeled herself to feel, gratitude, mild embarrassment, professional distance, began in that moment to shift. The wedding was beautiful in the way weddings always are when you stop being afraid. Sofia moved through it with Kai at her side, and his presence was so absolute and effortless that within 20 minutes the subtle cruelties of the room, the glances from Daniel's cousins, the whispered conference near the bar, simply stopped mattering. He was not performing for the room. He did not need to perform. He was simply present in the way that mountains are present, and the room rearranged itself around him. They found a table. Matteo fell asleep against Kai's arm before the actress arrived, which is the kind of thing a 4-year-old does to a man without asking permission, and Kai did not move or shift or look uncomfortable. He let Matteo sleep and ate his dinner with his free hand and talked to Sofia in a voice low enough to be private. He asked about her. Not the performative asking, not the job first, the polite facts. He asked what she was afraid of. He asked what she was rebuilding. He said both of these things so directly that Sofia had no defenses prepared, and she answered honestly before she could stop herself. She told him about the marriage in 2 careful sentences, and then 2 more, and then without meaning to she told him things she hadn't said to anyone because there had been no one who asked the right way. He listened the way people who are used to being obeyed sometimes learn to listen, with his whole face turned toward her, his attention a physical thing, a weight that was also a warmth. The platinum ring on his pinky caught the candlelight every time he set down his glass, a small bright point that her eyes kept returning to. She asked what he did. "Business," he said. "What kind?" His mouth curved just at one corner. "The complicated kind." She should have pushed. She didn't. She let it sit, and the mystery of it was part of the warmth. They danced once after the cake, when the DJ shifted to something slower and the lights went amber. He led without leading, without pulling or pressing, just moving, and she found herself moving with him as though they had done this before. Matteo had been transferred to a chair with Jiangsu seated silently nearby, and the dance floor was warm and the city glittered 30 floors below the glass, and Sofia's hand was in Kai's, and she was not thinking about the divorce or the year of humiliations or the women at the bar who had whispered. She was thinking about the way his hand felt at the small of her back, sure and still, and how she was not afraid of it. That was when the glass door at the far end of the rooftop shattered. It was not an accident. 3 men came through it, not guests, not staff, moving with the directional intent of people who had a specific destination. They wore casual clothes. 2 of them had their hands inside their jackets. The third was on his phone, and his eyes found Kai before they found anything else in the room, and something in his face went cold with satisfaction. The room was still processing, the broken glass, the confusion, the spike in voices, when Kai moved. He moved Sofia behind him with one arm and said something to Jiangsu, 3 words in Korean, flat and absolute, and Jiangsu picked up Mateo and had him behind a marble pillar before the child had fully woken up. Then Kai walked toward the 3 men with the same unhurried, inevitable economy he'd used stepping out of a car in the rain, and Sofia understood, watching him close the distance, that she was watching a man move into something he had done many times before. She did not see everything that happened in the next 90 seconds. She saw what she could see from behind the pillar where Jiangsu had positioned himself. She saw Kai intercept the first man before he had fully drawn his hand from his jacket, and the movement was clinical and total and over before it looked like it had started. She saw the second man go down. She saw the third turn and move toward the door and get no more than 4 steps. Then Kai was walking back to her. His suit was unmarked. His face was what it had been all evening, controlled, still, watchful. He was not even breathing hard. "We're leaving," he said very quietly. Jiangsu was already moving with Mateo. Sofia took her son's hand. The room was chaos behind them, guests scrambling, phones out, someone in a silver dress crying into her husband's arm. A back corridor. A service elevator. A different car than the one they'd arrived in, already idling at the loading dock. The city moved past the windows. Mateo, fully awake now and vibrating with confused energy, asked if there had been fireworks. "Yes," Kai said. "The loud kind." "Cool," Mateo said. He fell asleep again in 7 minutes. Sofia looked at Kai across the back seat. The partition to the front was closed. She could hear her own breathing and his, and the sound of the city and very little else. "Tell me who you are," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "You already know." She did know. She had known since the glass broke and he had moved without hesitation, since she had watched those men and understood in the wordless way that the body understands things before the mind gets there. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But there was another part, the part that had spent a year feeling invisible, feeling like a woman the world had gently but firmly decided it was done with, and that part was watching the man across from her with something it took her 3 more days to name. She said very quietly, almost to herself, "I think I'm falling for you." He looked at her for a long time. He did not say anything. But his hand, resting between them on the leather seat, turned palm up. She put her hand in it. Outside, the city ran past the windows, bright and cold and absolutely indifferent, and inside the car it was warm. The morning after the wedding, Sofia woke up in her own bed with Mateo's knee in her ribs and the sense that something had changed in the atmosphere while she slept. Through the window, the city was doing its pale gray morning. She could hear her mother in the kitchen. The cabinet, the spoon, the pause, the second spoon because Elena always added more than the instructions said. Sofia had been listening to that rhythm her whole life and it had never sounded so reassuring. She got up carefully, extracting herself from Mateo's sprawl without waking him, and went to the kitchen. Elena looked up from the coffee. Something moved across her mother's face. "How's your hand?" Elena said. "Fine." Sofia sat down at the table. "How's yours?" Elena poured a second cup and pushed it across. She sat down. They looked at each other. "Tell me what happened," Elena said. Sofia told her. Not everything, she held back the last part, her hand in his, what she'd said, but she told her about the men in the glass and the way Kai had moved in the service elevator and Mateo asking about fireworks. She told it plainly, without drama, in the way that truth sometimes comes out when you're still processing it and performance would cost too much energy. Elena listened. She did not interrupt. When Sofia finished, Elena wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and looked at the table. "I looked him up," she said. "And?" "Nothing. Officially nothing. Which is its own kind of answer." She looked up. "But I found a forum. About a group in Seoul. The Tiger Line." She said the words carefully. "The ring, Sofia. The platinum one." Sofia was quiet. "I know," she said finally. Elena stared at her. "Sofia. I know what he is." She wrapped her own hands around her cup. "I knew when he walked back to me after. Some part of me knew before that, honestly. People who move like that, people who give instructions like, the person who sent that photo will not be sending anything else. They're not CEOs, Mom." She almost smiled. Unless it's a very different kind of company. And that doesn't change anything for you. It changes everything, Sofia said quietly. I just don't know yet which direction. After breakfast, while Matteo was watching cartoons in the living room, Sofia's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it. It was a video, 47 seconds long. She watched it once, very still. Then she set the phone face down on the table and sat there for a moment. Then she picked it up and watched it again. Kai's face in what looked like a warehouse. Harsh industrial light. Men in a half circle around him. He was speaking Korean, and her Korean was limited, but the posture, the deference of the men around him, the way they waited before responding, she understood the language of power even without the words. At the end of the video, a man knelt. Kai looked at him. He said something once, flat and final. The man nodded. Kai turned and walked away, and the camera caught his profile. The jaw, the ring catching the light, the absolute absence of doubt. She texted the number. Thank you for last night. Are you free today? The response came in 6 minutes. Yes. An address followed. She went. She took Matteo because she had nowhere to leave him, and because something told her that was all right. The address was a penthouse floor of a building she had passed 100 times without knowing what was inside. The elevator required a code that Kai sent her in a second message. The doors opened into a space that was. She stood in the entry and looked at it and understood it was a home, not a showroom. There were books, actual books, stacked and splayed on surfaces in the comfortable disorder of someone who read rather than displayed. There was a kitchen that smelled of coffee and something herbed and warm. Matteo walked in ahead of her, looked around at the high ceilings and the floor-to-ceiling windows and the city spread below like a map of everything, and said, "Whoa," with total sincerity. Kai appeared from a hallway. He was in a different register today. No suit, dark trousers, a plain gray shirt, sleeves pushed to the elbows. He looked less constructed and more himself, and she found that version even harder to resist. He looked at Matteo first. Have you eaten? I had cereal, Matteo said with deep suspicion. I have better, Kai said. He made Matteo scrambled eggs without ceremony, standing at the stove in the same focused way he did everything, and Matteo sat on a high stool at the kitchen island and watched with the intense investigative energy of a 4-year-old forming an opinion. By the time the eggs were done, the opinion was evidently favorable. While Matteo ate, Kai and Sofia stood at the window with their coffee. I know what you are, Sofia said. I know, he said. I want you anyway, she said. I'm telling you directly because I don't have the patience anymore for things that take too long to say. I've wasted enough time on things that were wrong for me. I don't want to waste it being afraid of something that might be right. He looked at her with the long, measuring moment she had come to understand was just how he looked at things that mattered to him. It is dangerous, he said. Last night was not unusual. There are people who want what I have, and some of them are willing to use everything to get it. I know. If you're with me, I know, she said again firmly. He was quiet. Then he reached into his shirt pocket and set 2 keys on the glass ledge between them. They were attached to a simple ring, no fob, no label. The building on Westmore, he said. 12th floor. 3 bedrooms. The lease is in your mother's name so it's not tied to me. Sofia stared at the keys. Kai, there is also a school enrollment for Matteo. One of the better ones. Paid through his 18th birthday. And a medical account. He said it without presentation, without waiting for her response, the way you might hand someone a useful tool. Here, this is what you need. This is separate from whatever we are. These things exist regardless. Sofia picked up the keys. They were cold and solid in her hand. You already decided, she said softly. Before I said anything today. You already decided. His mouth did the almost smile. I decide quickly, he said. And I don't undecide. She looked at him. She thought about the year behind her, the marriage, the slow erosion of herself, the careful way she'd been putting herself back together piece by piece. She thought about how she had been afraid for so long of choosing wrong again. She thought about a man who sent a car and a dress and a note that said Jiangsu will be with you all evening, and then dismantled 3 men without a scratch on his suit, and then went home and learned, apparently, how to make excellent scrambled eggs. Okay, she said quietly. He looked at her. Okay, he said back. In the kitchen, Matteo pushed his empty plate forward and announced, that was the best eggs. Can I have more? Yes, Kai said. Elena, when Sofia called her from the lobby an hour later and told her about the apartment keys and the school enrollment and the medical account, said nothing for a long time. Mom? I'm here, Elena said. I'm thinking. What are you thinking? Elena paused. I'm thinking that a man who plans that far ahead is either very good or very dangerous. What if he's both? Sofia asked. Elena didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was low and tired and honest. Then God help us, she said. Because I'm not sure I know how to stop this. She held the phone against her ear and stared at the wall of the restaurant kitchen she had worked in for 9 years, and she thought about the platinum ring and the matte black card and the 47-second video, and she thought about the midnight blue dress and the sapphire earrings and the felt cap for a 4-year-old boy he had never met. She thought about both things at once, holding them, not yet sure which was heavier. They moved into the Westmore building on a Tuesday. Elena negotiated a temporary compression of her shifts. Not a quit, she was not willing to quit, but enough days free to walk the new neighborhood and find the pharmacist and the closest park and the grocery with the best produce, the 10,000 small anchors that made a place feel safe. The apartment was on the 12th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows. 3 bedrooms. 1 for Elena, 1 for Sofia, 1 for Matteo, which he toured 3 times before agreeing it was satisfactory. The kitchen was a different grammar entirely from the old apartment with its stuck drawer and its microwave that ran 4 degrees hot. Elena stood in her new bedroom that first Tuesday night and looked out at the city and tried to feel grateful and found she felt mostly afraid. Not afraid of the apartment. Afraid of what came with it, the invisible tether it represented, the man on the other end. She had told Sofia, God help us. She had meant it. She had not, however, said no. She was conscious of that. Wednesday was normal. Thursday morning was normal. Friday morning was a different thing entirely. Elena was making breakfast when the sound came, not loud, not cinematic, just a specific mechanical click from somewhere in the hallway that she recognized in the oldest part of her as wrong. She stood with the spatula in her hand and she listened, and then she moved. She went to Sofia's room. She put her hand on Sofia's shoulder and said, very quietly and very clearly, get Matteo. Get him right now. Bathroom at the end of the hall, the one with no windows. Sofia was awake and moving before Elena had finished the sentence. She had been, Elena thought, already sleeping lightly. Already listening. They were in the bathroom, Matteo wrapped in his blanket and confused and starting to cry, when the front door came open. Not broken open, picked. A sound that was almost polite. 3 men. Elena knew there were 3 because she heard the footsteps and counted, pressed against the bathroom door with her hand over Matteo's mouth as gently as she could, feeling his small chest heaving against her arm. What happened next she learned afterward. She pieced it together from the mess they found and from what Jiangsu told her the following afternoon. Jiangsu had not gone home that night. None of Kai's people had. They had been outside, 2 of them, operating in a pattern Elena hadn't noticed. 1 in the building across, 1 in a car below, because Kai had known the threat was coming more specifically than he'd said, and he had positioned people accordingly. They came through the window at the same moment the men came through the front door. The exchange was brief and absolute and very loud. Matteo screamed once. Then Elena said his name and held him tighter and he pressed his face into her neck and she felt him shaking and she was shaking too, but she did not let go and she did not move and she said, quietly and steadily into his ear, you are safe. You are safe. I have you. Over and over, the way she had once said it to his mother in a different apartment in a different emergency 20 years ago. The sound stopped. 12 minutes after they had started. She counted. Then Jiangsu's voice came through the door, Mrs. Ramirez. It is done. You can come out. She did not come out immediately. She waited 30 seconds longer, holding her grandson, feeling his breathing slow. Then she opened the door. The apartment was not destroyed. A professional violence. Contained, purposeful. The front door was damaged. 2 of the entry windows were broken. There were men she did not recognize standing in positions throughout the apartment, quiet and watchful. Jiangsu stood in the center of the living room with his hands at his sides and his face as readable as a wall. Kai arrived 8 minutes later. He came through the front door and looked at Jiangsu first, a 2-second communication that Elena watched and could not translate, and then he looked around the apartment and then he looked at Elena. She was still standing in the hallway with Matteo in her arms. Matteo had calmed. He was looking at all the people in his apartment with enormous round eyes and the particular child's mix of terror and fascination. Mrs. Ramirez, Kai said. He's fine, Elena said because that was the most important sentence. We're fine. Sofia's fine. Sofia came out of the bathroom behind Elena, and she moved directly to Kai without appearing to decide to, and he put one arm around her, once, briefly, and then stepped back to give her room to breathe because he understood, evidently, that she was a woman who needed room. Kai turned to Elena. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her in the rain outside the restaurant. measuring, present, completely attentive. And then, to Elena's absolute astonishment, he went down on one knee. Not both knees, it was not theatrical. Just one, carefully, the way a man might kneel to acknowledge something that required acknowledgement. He was tall enough that even kneeling he was not small. He looked up at her and his face was, she searched for the word and found it later, honest. For the first time his face was completely honest. This happened in my world, he said. In your home because of my world. That is mine to answer for. Elena looked at him. She was still holding her grandson. Matteo had his head on her shoulder and was watching Kai with serious interest. What do you want from me? Elena said. She meant it plainly, she was past performance. Nothing, Kai said. I am telling you what I will give. There are men outside now, and there will be men outside from now on, and this will not happen again in any building I have placed you in. Your daughter and your grandson will not be touched. You will not be touched. He paused. I know what I am. I know what comes with me. You asked me to be kind to your daughter, and I am choosing to understand that as a larger request than an evening. Elena looked at him for a long time. Matteo lifted his head from her shoulder and looked at Kai with great seriousness. Are you going to live here? He asked. Something moved through Kai's face, not quite the smile but very close, and more real than the almost smile Elena had seen before. No, he said. I live somewhere else. Oh, Matteo said. He thought about this. Okay. Elena had spent 48 years learning to read men. She had survived a husband who had left, a decade of single motherhood, a son-in-law who had dimmed her daughter down to a nightlight and called it love. She understood the particular way that dangerous men projected safety. She understood the difference between a man who protected something because he needed it to survive and a man who protected something because he had chosen to. She was not entirely certain which this was. But she thought about the forum post and the platinum ring, and she thought about the dress in the cream bag and the small felt cap for a 4-year-old boy he had never met, and she thought about the scrambled eggs and the school enrollment paid through an 18-year-old's birthday, and the note that said, Jiangsu will be with you all evening. Do not worry about him. She reached down and put her free hand on Kai's shoulder, briefly, not a blessing, not an invitation, just an acknowledgement of what had been said. Get up, she said. He stood. You will tell me, she said, when the danger changes? Not after it changes. Before. Yes, he said. And you will not lie to my daughter. No, he said. About the important things. About any of them, he said. She looked at him one more time. Then she turned to Jiangsu. Is there any food left in the kitchen? My grandson missed breakfast. Jiangsu looked mildly startled, the first crack in his wall face she had seen. I will check, he said. There were eggs. There was bread. There was half a jar of the banana jam Matteo liked on toast. Elena put Matteo down and he took Kai's hand, unprompted, with the total unearned confidence of a 4-year-old who had decided, and he led him to the kitchen island. Can you make eggs? Matteo asked. I can, Kai said. Good, Matteo said. I know you can. Elena stood in the hallway and watched the Mafia boss make her grandson breakfast in an apartment she hadn't paid for, in a building guarded by men she would never be introduced to, in a life that had moved so far from the one she'd planned that she no longer had the coordinates. She thought, here we are. She went to the kitchen and sat down, and when Kai set a plate in front of her without being asked, she ate. Sofia found the files 3 weeks after the move. She was not looking for them. She was looking for Matteo's immunization records in the document storage. Kai had helped them digitize everything in the first week, a practical sweep of all the papers that Elena had kept in a shoebox under her bed for years. He had a system, everything organized, labeled, accessible. He had done it on a Sunday afternoon at the kitchen island while Matteo sat beside him and ate crackers and applied stickers to anything he could reach, including the back of Kai's hand, where a cartoon dinosaur had been placed with great ceremony and not removed. Sofia had looked at him then, doing that small domestic thing with his sleeves rolled up, and she had felt something very like vertigo. She found a folder at the back of the digital archive labeled, simply, R. She opened it because she thought it was her mother's, Ramirez, probably old tax returns, and she found it was not that at all. It was a financial document. Then another. Then another. Her mother's medical debt, gone. 3 years of it. The back surgery from 2021, the ER visit when Elena had fainted at work and they had held her overnight, the physical therapy she had stopped halfway through because she couldn't afford the co-pays. Gone, paid in full, receipts included, all dated from the week after the wedding. Sofia's divorce legal fees, cleared. They had been a stone on her chest for 2 years. The retainer, the court filings, the custody modification. Gone. Mateo's school enrollment was there, the paperwork she had already known about, but beneath it were 3 additional documents she had not seen. A trust account. A college fund, already seeded with an amount that made her close the document and open it again. A beneficiary assignment that listed Mateo Rafael Ramirez Torres and included a letter, in Korean and in English side by side, that had apparently been notarized by 2 different solicitors. She read the letter. It said, in language that was formal and entirely without drama, "In the event of my incapacitation or death, the above-named child is to receive the attached resources in full, managed by the named trust officer until his 25th birthday. No conditions. No contact required." Sofia sat with the letter for a long time. The apartment was quiet. Elena was at work and Mateo was napping, and the city moved outside the windows, indifferent and gray and going about its business. She thought, he did all of this before I said I wanted him. She thought, he did all of this and told me only about the keys. She thought about the man who had watched her across a rooftop table and asked what she was afraid of and what she was rebuilding, and she understood now that he had been filing her answers. Not collecting information, building. The way a man builds a house for someone specific, dimensioned to the exact shape of their need. She texted him, "Can you come over?" He arrived in 20 minutes. He came in and looked at her. She was still at the kitchen table, the documents still on the screen, and did not pretend not to understand what she had found. "When were you going to tell me?" she asked. "When it seemed like the right time," he said. He sat down across from her. "Or not at all if the right time never came. You would have just done all of this without telling me." "Yes," he said simply. "Why?" He thought before he spoke, always as though words were not disposable things. "Because it's what should exist," he said. "Regardless of what happens between us. Your mother worked double shifts for 30 years. Your son shouldn't start at 0. These things should simply be true." Sofia closed the laptop. She looked at her hands. "I need you to understand something," she said. He waited. "The last person I trusted like this," she stopped, started again. "He told me he was protecting me too. He used it to control me. The protection became a cage." She looked up. "I need to know the difference." Kai looked at her steadily. "The difference," he said, "is that a cage locks from the outside. Everything I have done you can walk away from. The money exists without me. The apartment has your mother's name. The school is paid and is not contingent on anything." He held her gaze. "You can end this conversation right now, today, and Mateo's trust does not change. Your mother's debt does not come back." He paused. "I have given you all the doors. I have not locked any of them." The silence between them was so complete she could hear the refrigerator hum. "That," she said, and her voice was not quite steady, "is the most terrifying thing anyone has ever said to me." "Why?" "Because it means I'm choosing," she said. "And I have to live with the choice." He said nothing. He let that be true. She stood up. She walked around the table to where he sat, and he turned in his chair to face her, and she stood in front of him and looked at his face, the jaw and the dark eyes and the platinum ring and the quiet, steady, absolute patience of a man who had never in his life been uncertain about what he wanted. She kissed him. Not tentatively. Not with the half-apologetic lean of someone testing the water. She put her hands on his face and she kissed him the way she had been wanting to since the rooftop, since his hand turned palm up in the back of the car, since she had watched him make scrambled eggs for her son with total concentration. He kissed her back with the same controlled intensity he brought to everything, his hands careful at her waist, not pulling, just holding, the way you hold something you understand is yours but are not taking for granted. When she stepped back, his eyes were open. He was watching her. "Okay," she said, the same word as the apartment, the same word that had become, between them, something specific. "Okay," he said. She sat down beside him. She took his hand and turned it over and looked at the ring on his pinky, the tiger, the platinum, the weight of what it represented, and she ran her thumb across it once. "Show me everything," she said. He looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean I don't want the edited version. I don't want the version you decide I can handle. Show me who you are." She kept her eyes on the ring. "All of it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "All right." And Sofia Ramirez, 25 years old, recently divorced, mother of a 4-year-old who put stickers on things, looked up at the man who was going to show her everything, and she did not flinch. He did not show her all of it at once. That was not how these things worked, and he understood she was not asking to be dropped into a warehouse and handed a gun. What she was asking for was the truth in installments, the real architecture of the life she was stepping into, and he respected that enough to begin. He brought her into his office building on a Thursday morning. The building was corporate on the outside, clean lines and glass, no indication. The interior was different. A floor he accessed with a separate elevator code, functional in the way of places where work is done that does not need to look like work. Men moved through it with the particular efficiency of people who understood exactly what they were supposed to do at any moment. He introduced her to no one by name. He explained what each room was for, briefly, in the factual voice of someone giving a building tour. Here we track the ports, here we manage the accounts, here is where disputes are brought before they become expensive. She listened. She asked questions, clean, precise questions that impressed him in a way he had not expected to be impressed. She asked, "What is your relationship to law enforcement here?" He said, "Managed." She asked, "When was the last time you lost someone?" He said, 14 months ago. A man named Park Hyun-woo. He looked away when he said it. She asked, "Was it your fault?" He said after a pause, "Not directly." She said, "That means yes." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. She absorbed this. She moved on. She spent 2 hours in the building. She did not see everything. There were rooms she understood she was not being taken into, and she did not push, but she saw enough to understand the scale and the organization and the weight of what Kai carried. She saw the deference and the fear and the respect in equal measure, and she saw the way men twice her age stopped talking when he walked in, not from rehearsed protocol but from something older and more instinctive. She saw him manage a dispute. 2 men, seated, speaking Korean rapidly and with rising anger. Kai listened for 60 seconds. He spoke once. The argument stopped. One of the men stood and bowed slightly and left. The other sat for a moment longer and then left without a word. 4 minutes total. Walking back to the elevator, she said, "What was the dispute about?" "Money owed from a property acquisition." "Who was right?" He considered. "Neither. But one of them was more useful." She looked at him sideways. "You're honest." "I try to be," he said. "To you." In the elevator she said, "Are you going to kill anyone today?" He looked at the doors. "I hope not," he said. She laughed, once, startled, and he turned to look at her as though the sound had surprised him. "What?" she said. "You laughed," he said. "You made a joke." "I wasn't," he said. "But I'm glad it sounded like one." She held that laugh for the rest of the day. He drove her home in the early evening. They stopped for food at a street vendor, a particular cart on a particular corner where the man behind it nodded at Kai the way people nod at people they have known for years, and they ate standing up at the edge of a small park while the light went amber. She was thinking about something she had been sitting with for 3 days. She said it while looking at the park, not at him. "I need to tell you something about my ex-husband." He was quiet, listening. "He hurt me," she said. He never broke anything. But the kind of slow hurting that's harder to explain because there are no photographs of it. Making me feel stupid for 3 years. Making me doubt things I knew." She paused. "I'm telling you because I need you to know that I am not easily broken. And I am also not pretending the ways I'm still putting myself back together." He looked at her when she finished. "What was his name?" he said. She looked at him. "Why?" Pause. "Knowing his name is not the same as doing anything about it," he said. She almost smiled. "Daniel Torres." He said nothing more about it. They walked back to the car. 3 nights later, he called her at 11:30 and said, "I need you to stay home tomorrow." She asked why. He said, "There's something I have to resolve." She asked if it was dangerous. He said, "For the other party." She thought about that for a long time after she hung up. The next morning she found herself driving to the building anyway, not because she had decided to, but because her body had made the decision before her mind finished arguing. She parked across the street. She had his access code. She had never used it uninvited. She sat with her hand on the steering wheel and thought about what she was doing and why, and the answer was, "I said all of it. I said show me everything. I can't now decide the everything has a boundary I set from outside." She went up. The floor was at reduced activity, fewer men than usual. She walked down the corridor she knew and stopped before she reached the room, because the door was open and she could hear voices. She looked in. Kai was at the far end of the room. Seated across from him, 2 men, one of them restrained, zip-tied to the chair, not violently but absolutely. The restrained man was speaking in Korean. Rapid pleading. The second man, standing, translated periodically in English, which meant he knew she might be near, or he always did this, she couldn't be sure. Kai listened. Then he spoke. The translator said, "He says the contract was broken when the attack on your family was authorized. He says the terms were very clear." The restrained man spoke again. Kai looked at him for a long, still moment. Then Kai said 3 words in Korean, quiet and final, and stood. The translator said something into a radio. 2 men came into the room from a side door. The restrained man was escorted out. The translator left after. Kai was left alone in the room. He turned. He saw her in the doorway. They looked at each other across the length of the room. She walked in. She walked the full length to where he stood, and she could see the particular stillness in him, not guilt, not performance. The stillness of someone who has done what needed doing and has made peace with it. Is it done? She said. Yes, he said. Did he? She stopped. She thought about what question she was asking and whether she wanted the answer. He waited. Is it done? She said again differently. Not a question about the man in the chair. A question about the threat, the chain of consequences, the danger that had followed them from the rooftop through the Westmore building. For now, he said. These things are never completely done. But the immediate threat is ended. She nodded. She looked at him, the table, the chairs, the industrial light, and the man standing in the middle of all of it with the absolute composure of someone who had never once been in a room that required more than he could give. She walked to him and she put her arms around him and she held on. He was still for a half second, surprised, she thought, in the particular way of people who receive warmth and haven't fully built the muscle for it, and then his arms came around her and he held her back and she pressed her face against his shoulder. I'm not afraid of you, she said into the fabric. She felt him breathe. I know, he said. I want to be clear, she said. That's not the same as approving of everything you do. I know that too, he said. But I'm still here. I see that, he said. And something in his voice for the first time was unguarded, not quite raw. Nothing in him was raw, but something underneath the control that was real and careful and enormous. She thought, I love him. She did not say it yet. But she thought it, standing in that room with its harsh light and its terrible specific purpose, and she held it inside her the way you hold something fragile until you're sure you're standing somewhere it won't break. 6 weeks after the Westmore move, the attack came in full. It was not subtle. It was not the careful surveillance of a threatening photograph or the 3-man incursion of the rooftop. It was organized, and it was large, and it arrived on a Thursday afternoon at 3:12 p.m., when Elena was home from her shift and Mateo was down for a nap and Sofia was in the kitchen on a work call, standing at the window because she thought better when she could see the sky. The building had 12 floors and 4 stairwells. They came up 3 of them simultaneously. Sofia saw the first vehicle pull up through the window, and she recognized what it was the way she had come to recognize these things. A black van, 2 men in front, and the particular stillness of men waiting for a signal. She dropped her work call without a word and moved. Elena was in the hallway, already moving toward Mateo's room, because some frequency in the building's energy had shifted and she had learned, since the first night, to trust that frequency. Panic room, Elena said. The apartment's panic room was off the master bedroom, a fact Elena had not known existed when they'd moved in, and which Kai had shown her personally on the 3rd day, the way you show someone a fire extinguisher. Not with drama, just with the calm insistence of someone who plans for things. Steel-reinforced door. Independent ventilation. Radio link. Water and food for 48 hours. Elena had memorized the code and made Sofia memorize it and had mentioned it to Mateo, who was 4 and had immediately called it the secret room and visited it 3 times voluntarily. She had Mateo in her arms before the sound started. Sofia was behind her. The door sealed. The sound, when it came, was comprehensive. Not a movie sound. Just the flat percussion of a building in conflict. Sounds that meant things she could not fully translate but could feel in her teeth. Stairwells, corridors, the particular acoustic of a space being moved through with force and opposed. Elena sat on the floor of the panic room with Mateo in her lap. He was awake, roused by something he couldn't name, and now he was pressed against her with his eyes large and his small hands gripping her shirt. Is this fireworks? He said. Yes, Elena said. The loud kind? Yes, baby. Okay, he said and pressed his face into her neck. Sofia was at the radio panel, monitoring. Kai had installed a channel that patched to Jiangsu's frequency, and through the static she could hear voices in Korean, flat and operational, updates she could not fully translate but whose tone she had learned to read. Organized. Working. Not panicked. They're moving, she said. Elena nodded. Jiangsu is, it sounds like, the 3rd floor is clear. They're pushing toward the lobby. The sound outside intensified once, briefly. Mateo made a small sound. Elena held him. Then it dropped. Not silence, the sounds changed. Voices now instead of percussion. One prolonged exchange that ended cleanly. Then Kai's voice came through the radio. Not Jiangsu, Kai directly, which meant he was in the building. Sofia gripped the panel. He's here, she said. He's in the building. Elena said, how bad? Sofia translated the tone as best she could. The lobby is secure. There, she stopped. A change. He's in the east stairwell. 3rd floor. A burst of sound. 2 sounds. Then 1 more. Then, nothing. Sofia stared at the panel. Kai, she said into the radio, which she knew she shouldn't have done. She said it anyway. Kai, say something. Static. Then Jiangsu's voice, not Kai's. Secure. Building is secure. Where is he? Sofia said. Pause. 3rd floor east. He is. She was already at the door. Elena caught her arm. Sofia. Let me go, Sofia said. Wait for the all clear. Let me go. Her voice was quiet and total, the voice Elena recognized as the one Sofia had developed in the last year of her bad marriage. The voice that had finally, after too long, said, enough. Elena released her arm. Sofia opened the panic room door. The apartment was intact. 2 of Kai's men were in the hallway, positioned, professional. They let her through without speaking. She went to the stairwell. 3rd floor east. She went down. Kai was sitting against the stairwell wall, which was the most wrong thing she had ever seen. He was never sitting, never reduced, never against anything. He had his hand pressed to his side. His jacket was open. Jiangsu was crouched beside him, speaking quietly in Korean, and 2 other men flanked them. She came down the last 4 steps and knelt in front of him. His eyes were open. They found her immediately. How bad? She said. She said it the same way Elena had asked her, from inside the panic room, because some questions become family. 2, he said. The vest caught one. And the other? He moved his hand slightly. She looked. She made herself look because she was not going to be someone who couldn't look. We need a hospital, she said to Jiangsu. We have a doctor, Jiangsu said. He is 3 minutes away. 4 minutes is too long if he... 2 minutes then, Jiangsu said, in the flat tone of someone who adjusts estimates rather than argues. She looked at Kai. He was watching her face with the focused attention he gave to things that mattered. Don't, she said. I'm not planning to, he said. Don't be calm right now. I'm always calm, he said. I know, she said. It's infuriating. They almost smile. Even now, even here, in a stairwell that smelled of gunpowder and concrete, they almost smile. The doctor arrived, Kai's personal physician, not a hospital, someone who moved through the building and set up in a cleared apartment on the 2nd floor and worked with the efficiency of a man who had done this before in configurations more challenging than this one. Sofia was allowed to stay. She sat in the corner and watched, and she did not look away, and she held on to the image of the man on the table with his eyes on her face because she needed her hands to be still. He was all right. The vest had absorbed the first impact. The second was serious but had missed what it could not be allowed to hit. The doctor worked for 40 minutes and then stepped back and said, in English for her benefit, that Kai would be uncomfortable for several weeks and should not be doing anything physically demanding, which he said with the resigned expression of a man who knew the instruction would be followed approximately as well as instructions were always followed. They brought him back to the apartment upstairs. He was on his feet, not easily, not as he usually moved, but on his feet, and Elena was in the hallway when they brought him up. Elena looked at him. He looked at her. She stepped forward and did something Sofia had never seen her mother do with a man. She reached up and put both hands on either side of his face, the way she would have with Sofia or with Mateo, and she held his face and she looked at him. You're alive, Elena said. Yes, he said. Good, she said. Because I need you to stay that way. He looked at her from inside her hands, and something moved through his face that was not quite visible but was absolutely real, something old and careful and finally, quietly settled. I intend to, he said. She let go of his face. She stepped back. There is food in the kitchen, she said. I'm going to heat it. She turned and went to the kitchen. Sofia looked at Kai. She loves you, Sofia said quietly. He looked toward the kitchen, where Elena was moving with the particular composure of a woman who expresses love through action because words have always cost her something. I know, he said. I am trying to be worth it. Sofia took his hand, carefully the side away from the wound, and held it. You're not perfect, she said. No, he agreed. But you're here, she said. And you came back. I will always come back, he said. She looked at their hands. She thought about the year behind her, all the wreckage and the rebuilding. She thought about her mother making food in the kitchen. She thought about Mateo upstairs in the panic room, calling it the secret room, pressing his face into Elena's neck. I love you, she said. It was the first time. She said it plainly without decoration. He looked at her for the long, still moment. His hand tightened on hers. I know, he said. She almost laughed. That's not, you're supposed to. I love you, he said. And then the almost smile became, finally, simply a smile, real and unguarded and enormously human in a face she had come to think of as composed of control. I know you wanted it the other way. But I needed to say it after, not before, so you'd know I wasn't saying it as a response. She stared at him. That, she said, is the most specific thing you have ever said to me. I've been thinking about when to say it for 3 weeks, he said. She kissed him carefully with her hand against his face, away from the pain. He held her with his free arm and held on. In the kitchen, Elena turned up the heat under the pot and said nothing and let the sound of the city come through the window and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that the specific gravity of this life had shifted toward something she might allow herself to call enough. 8 months later, on a Saturday evening in early spring, the city smelled like rain that hadn't arrived yet and the restaurant on Westmore was doing strong business and Mateo had learned to read 3-letter words and to ride a balance bike and to say annyeong with complete confidence to every Korean speaker he met, which he did with the total absence of self-consciousness available only to the very young. Elena was still working. Not double shifts, she had accepted a single shift, the evening one, because she liked the dinner rush and because work was not something she was willing to surrender to change circumstances. Mr. Park had hired 2 additional servers since she'd cut her hours, and she trained them both and felt something that was not exactly pride but was adjacent to it. She had met 3 of Kai's lieutenants now. They all called her Mrs. Ramirez or ma'am, and they all spoke to her with a precision that suggested they had been specifically instructed on the subject, and she had decided she preferred not to know exactly what the instruction had been. Jiangsu had become, in the way of things that solidify through repeated emergency, something like a fixed point in the household's universe. He had never, in 8 months, expressed a personal opinion. He had, however, once watched an entire episode of a children's cartoon with Mateo without being asked to, and Elena had made a note of it. She knew that Kai was rebuilding. She understood enough by now to understand what that meant. Not the specific violence of it, she kept a considered distance from the specific violence, but the structure. Alliances shifting, power resettling after the attack, the particular tectonic slowness of a world that moved by reputation and leverage. He had been careful and largely absent for 3 months while it settled, and when he came back to being present he came back differently, more deliberate, she thought. As though the bullet in the stairwell had clarified something. He spent time with Mateo. Not performatively, not the studied effort of a man trying to demonstrate he was safe for children. He was just present, in the way she had come to understand was how he operated, fully without reservation for whatever was in front of him. He had taught Mateo to play Baduk on a simplified board. He was patient beyond anything Elena had expected, explaining the same rule 4 times without changing his tone, and Mateo had beaten him twice, which Kai claimed was genuine and which Elena was not entirely sure about. Sofia had started consulting work. Not in Kai's world, she had made this clear and he had not argued, but in small business development, the kind of work she had studied for and then abandoned for the marriage and now reclaimed. She was good at it. Quietly, steadily, structurally good at it, the way she was good at most things when she was allowed to be. Elena had watched her daughter transform across 8 months. Not into someone new, into someone more completely herself. The insecurity from the divorce had not vanished. It had integrated, been woven into texture rather than shadow. Sofia stood differently. Sofia spoke first now in rooms where she used to wait. Elena thought, there she is. On the Saturday evening in question, Kai called Sofia at 4 and asked if she would come somewhere with him. He asked Elena too and said to bring Mateo. He said it was nothing complicated. He said, I want to show you something and then after there will be good food and your mother doesn't have to cook. Elena said into her phone, tell me I'm not going to regret putting on nice shoes. He said, you should wear nice shoes. She wore nice shoes. The car came at 7. Jiangsu held the door. Mateo was in his best outfit and had negotiated the felt cap back into rotation after a period of not wearing it. He was at an age where accessories came in cycles, and he held Elena's hand in the elevator and then in the lobby and then looked up at her and said, where are we going? Somewhere good, Elena said. Are there eggs? Mateo said. Probably not, Elena said. Okay, Mateo said with the equanimity of someone who has accepted that not all outings involve eggs. They went to the Galleria. Elena recognized it from Sofia's description. The glass tower, the city below, the elevator that opened into gold light. The rooftop was different tonight than the wedding night. Quieter, private, tables cleared except for one in the center that had been set with a thoroughness that suggested deliberate intention. White tablecloth, candles, flowers in a color between champagne and cream. Soft light strung overhead, the kind that turned everything it touched into something worth keeping. It was exactly the rooftop where the glass had shattered 8 months ago. She recognized it. She looked at Kai, standing at the center of the space, and understood that was intentional. He had given back the room. Mateo, freed from the elevator, ran to the window wall and pressed his face against the glass and looked at the city below and said, "W," with exactly the same sincerity he had used the first morning in the penthouse. Sofia stood next to Elena. They looked at the table, the lights, the specific choreography of a man who planned carefully and well. "Mom," Sofia said quietly. "I see it," Elena said. "Are you okay?" Elena considered the question with the honesty it deserved. Her feet hurt. She was 48 years old with silver in her hair and a grandson who was going to cost her everything she had for the next 20 years. She was standing on a rooftop under strings of warm light with a family she had not predicted. "Yes," she said. "I think so." They had dinner. Kai had arranged a proper service, quiet and unhurried. Mateo ate approximately 40% of his meal and spent the rest of the time asking Jiangsu, stationed near the elevator, whether he could be a secret agent when he grew up. Jiangsu's answer was so unexpectedly detailed and practical that Elena had to look away to prevent herself from laughing in a way that would have required explanation. After dinner, after the plates had been cleared and the lights had dimmed to amber and the city below had shifted into its nighttime frequency, Kai looked at Sofia. He stood up from the table. Something in the movement made Elena put down her glass of water and look at him. Mateo instinctively climbed into Elena's lap and grew still. Kai moved to stand before Sofia. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat, the same motion she had seen once before, reaching for a card in the rain outside a restaurant, but what he brought out this time was not a card. It was a ring. Simple. Platinum band. A stone that caught the light, not large, not performative, exactly right. The way everything he chose was exactly right, which she had come to understand was not luck but attention. He went down on one knee. Not the kneeling of 8 months ago in the hallway, with its weight of apology and protection. This was different. This was, Elena watched his face and arrived at the word, arrived. He looked like a man who had reached the place he was going. "Sofia," he said. He spoke in Korean first. Elena did not understand it, but Sofia did. Her Korean had improved considerably in 8 months, and Elena watched her daughter's face process the words and watched something enormous move through it, something that had been building across a cold rainy night and 9 months of dinners and danger and slow, stubborn trust. Then he said it in English for the room. "I am not an easy thing to choose," he said. "I know what I am and what comes with me. I will not pretend otherwise and I will not ask you to be grateful for ordinary things when I have caused extraordinary problems." He held the ring at the level where she could take it or leave it, neither offering nor demanding. "But I will be here. Whatever form here takes. I will come back from every stairwell. I will make your son breakfast. I will be honest about the hard things and I will ask your mother's opinion and I will lose at Baduk to a 5-year-old and not let him win, because losing is a thing worth learning." His voice was steady. "Marry me." The rooftop was very quiet. Sofia looked at him. She looked at the ring. She looked over at Elena, and Elena looked back at her daughter's face, 25 years old, no longer insecure, no longer small, standing at the edge of a choice that had been built slowly and honestly and at great cost. Elena nodded. It was not permission. Sofia did not need permission. It was what it was, a mother looking at her daughter saying, "I see you. I see this. And I trust you." Sofia looked back at Kai. "Yes," she said. He put the ring on her finger. He stood. She put her hands on his face the way Elena had done in the hallway after the shooting, and she looked at him up close and he looked back and the distance between them closed. Mateo looked up at Elena. "Are they getting married?" he whispered. "Yes," Elena whispered back. "Cool," Mateo said. He thought about it. "Will there be cake?" "Almost certainly," Elena said. "Cool," Mateo said again with the satisfied nod of someone whose priorities are clear. Kai looked over at Elena and she stood up from the table and crossed to them both. This man with his tiger ring and his dark eyes and his controlled and careful face she had learned to read across 8 months of dinners and emergencies and small ordinary mornings, and she thought about what she had set in motion on a cold rainy night outside a restaurant with $11 in her wallet and an ache for her daughter that had nowhere to go. She had asked the stranger for a kindness. He had answered it with everything else. She put her hand on his arm, briefly, The same gesture as the hallway, the same acknowledgement. "Welcome to this family," she said. "God help you." His almost smile and then the full smile, real and unguarded and enormously human. "He may need to," Kai said. "He may," Elena agreed. They danced. Sofia and Kai first, slow and close, in the amber light with the city below and the guards outside the elevator door, and Elena watched her daughter's face over his shoulder, eyes closed, breathing easy, finally easy, and she held Matteo against her hip and she let herself feel all of it. The fear and the love and the improbability and the grace, all of it at once without shutting any of it down. Then Kai held out his hand to Elena, because he was a man of complete gestures. She handed Matteo to Jiangsu, who accepted the small warm weight with the surprised expression of someone who had not expected the assignment but was not going to refuse it. She took Kai's hand. She let him lead her in one slow turn under the lights. She thought, well, here we are. She thought, I asked a stranger in the rain to be kind to my daughter. She thought, I got something much larger than that and much more dangerous and it terrified me every single day. She thought, and look at her. Look at her. She let the music carry her, this woman of 48 with silver in her hair and aching feet and a heart that had never, not once, not ever, given up on her family. And outside, in the corridor and the stairwells and the loading dock in the street below, the men in dark coats stood at their posts and watched the city, and said nothing and let the dance continue. None of them knew, on that rooftop under the warm lights with the champagne still cold and Matteo asleep in Jiangsu's arms and the city blazing 40 floors below, that 3,000 miles away in Seoul a new name had been written beside Kai's in a ledger that did not forgive and did not forget, that the rival who had sent men through the Westmore stairwells had a brother, and the brother had allies, and the allies had already begun to move. Elena would learn this in 6 weeks. Sofia already suspected it. Kai had known it for a month and had said nothing because the ring was more important than the warning, and because some things deserved one perfect evening before the next storm arrived. He held Sofia's hand as they walked to the elevator, and she leaned into his side, and behind them the lights still swayed in the night air, and the story, as all the best stories do, was only just beginning.